Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, well, let's see. Hey there, today I have a special CGC unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up 6 slabs from CGC that had a little bit of a stopover with a third-party presser. This is the second part in probably an ongoing series where I am using third-party pressers to take care of my comic books before they get sent off to CGC for professional grading. And this time I sent my books to Comic Book Pressing, and they are located in California. And I decided to send 6 books to this presser. And the way it worked is I was able to identify 6 different comic books that I felt like were in definite need of some comic book CPR, but they weren't too high-end or anything crazy just until I became familiar with this presser. And I just wanted to make sure that it was somebody that I would trust doing business with. And I think one thing that I'm realizing when I'm contacting third-party pressers and I'm using their services is that it's really just an individual like you and me. And I'm trusting that I'm sending my comic books to them and they're going to receive them, handle them with care, treat the comics as if they were their own, make sure that everything is packed accordingly when it gets sent off to CGC. And there's a quite a bit of trust involved if you think about it. You know, I see a lot of these different pressers on social media or here on YouTube, and I see these big books being worked on. And I'm like, my goodness, there's really a lot of trust when those of us that are collectors, we take a lot of pride and a lot of care, and we're very specific, and we're like, how do we read books? How do we handle books? And then it comes to sending books off to a third party, whether it be a professional grader or a presser, and it's like, yeah, here you go. Here are my comics. So there's part of me that's really scared, to be honest, to kind of go through this process. You know, if you think about establishing a relationship with an individual or a business, you need to have several transactions completed where there's kind of good faith on both sides. And that takes time to develop. So in order to kind of kick things off, what I ended up doing is not necessarily sending books that I didn't think were worthy of cleaning and pressing, but I definitely sent books that, in an absolute worst case scenario, if something were to happen to these books where they got lost or stolen or damaged in some way, I would not be heartbroken. I'm not sending my lone copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 to a presser and then have the presser say, oh, hey, by the way, I fried your book. I lost it. My basement flooded and it got ruined or whatever. I'm not quite ready to just send off those big books to a presser. But you have to start somewhere, and that's what this video is all about. It's about my first experience sending books to Comic Book Pressing. They are on Instagram at comicbook_pressing or comicbookpressing.net. And you can read and find out more information on how to submit books to Comic Book Pressing. I know I keep saying that and it sounds generic, but that is the doing business as name for that individual presser. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at the 6 books in detail as far as which 6 comic books did I send to the presser, look at my cost involved, look at some of the details of the books, and we'll do that in spreadsheet form and kind of look at all the values. And then I'm going to go ahead and unbox these 6 slabs that I received from CGC, take a look at the grades. I have not seen the grades. This always makes me nervous, but I'm also excited to finally kind of reveal the grades and see, you know, how did the final grade match up with my predicted grades. So I'll show you that as far as what grade did I think the book had before I sent it off for pressing, and we'll kind of compare that and see how I did, see how the presser did, and then return to the numbers at the very end to evaluate the final value of the comic book after it has been encapsulated and compare it to the total cost of everything door to door. So the cost to acquire the raw comic book, the pressing fees, any taxes, all the shipping across the country and so forth, and see if this is really a worthwhile process. So let's take a look at the details of the 6 comic books that I sent off to comic book pressing. All right, the 6 comic books that I sent off to comic book underscore pressing are listed here in this spreadsheet, along with my source for how I acquired the book. I have Spectacular Spider-Man 116 that I got from Mile High Comics. I have Machine Man number 7 that I got from eBay. Now this one's interesting. Star Wars 34, I got this at an LCS where I bought a small stack of Star Wars comic books from around 1980 for about $5 a piece, and they all were around the same grade, a 9.2, 9.4. And I feel like this is probably a pretty fair comparison to see this issue of Star Wars 34 as compared to what the Star Wars book got from a different presser. So that'll be interesting to look at as well. X-Men 211 that I bought at a convention. Amazing Spider-Man 278 from Mile High Comics, and Blade Runner number 1 that I got from Atomic Avenue. Now, if we're looking at kind of what I paid for each book plus my assessed grade, I feel like these books are going to be a little bit more of a challenge for this presser, where in my previous video, I had sent 5 books off, and 4 of them I thought were 9.4, and 1 I thought was a 9.2. Here, if you look in column V at my predicted grades on these books, I've only got Blade Runner number 1 and Spectacular Spider-Man 116 at 9.4. I've got 3 others at 9.2, and Machine Man number 7 I have at an 8.5, so that'll be very interesting to see what happens with that book. Now, from a CGC value perspective, I've got the values kind of plugged in here. Again, at the predicted grades, and by predicted, I don't necessarily mean what is going to happen after pressing. What I mean is, if I were to send these books as is without any pressing, these are the grades that I think CGC would assign. And in column Y, I have those values here as well. Now, in column AC, I've also tracked the total cost to acquire the book. So it's my cost for the comic book itself, plus any tax or shipping or insurance or any other fees to get the book in my possession. So those are the 6 books. Go all the way to the end. I'll kind of show you where we will return to. And so I've got everything kind of plugged in here. So this area is kind of a summary of the current state of the books and my investment in each comic book. And then we'll fill out the rest after I reveal the grades and I figure out what the final assigned grade by CGC was. But I sent these 6 books off to comic book underscore pressing on October 26, 2022, and they were received by me from CGC on December 27th, 2022. So door to door, about 2 months, and I feel like that's probably what I would expect. Anything lesser than that seems a little too good to be true, and anything more than that, you know, probably depends on your presser and their turnaround times. But 2 months, I think, is very reasonable to allow for the presser to receive your books, queue them up, get them pressed, cold pressed, sent off to CGC, let CGC do their thing, and have the books returned. I didn't fast track any of these. It was all sent through their basic standard submission tier. And this column here is interesting because this really, really makes you think, because this is my total investment in 6 comic books. What I mean is, this is the cost to acquire the book raw, pay any tax or shipping. Then I've added the presser's fees plus the CGC fee on top of that. Now, this presser charged me $80 total to have these 6 books pressed and cleaned and forwarded onto CGC, which I thought was a very, very reasonable cost per book when you're talking about $13.33 per book, and that's to leave my hands and get all the way to CGC. So what I did was I included that $13.33 as part of the total updated cost to acquire the book completely encapsulated. So that's how I'm kind of looking at this. And you can see, like, when you're talking about getting the book for $50, $52, this one, Spectacular Spider-Man 116, the first appearance of Foreigner, $77.57, where I had assessed that book was going to be a 9.4, which again, what I try to do, like I do with all of these, is I try to build in a little bit of a buffer to help minimize my risk. But with this order, I actually took quite a bit of risk, because with these books being in a little bit of a lesser condition, you can see here that if these books did not improve, and I got 9.2s on some of these that I was predicting a 9.2, and even Machine Man 7 at an 8.5, they are not worth very much in terms of an actual CGC graded collectible. Only Blade Runner #1 and Spectacular Spider-Man 116, both I predicted in 9.4s, have value here. And so those were two books that I think were safe bets to send to a presser, but these four actually were not. So I ended up taking some risk here, whereas you can see here down in the total of column CM, if all of these books come back from CGC and the grades did not improve, and heaven forbid they got worse, but if they came back as is, I will have lost over $111, meaning I could have just bought these books slabbed in the grades that I said the books were in, and I obviously wouldn't necessarily do that. I'm not necessarily in the market for an ASM 278 and a 9.2 for $13. I'm looking at what I call the press potential, which are these values here, where you could see in a 9.8, these numbers look a little bit better. The 9.6, 9.4 values are always kind of strange. Sometimes the 9.4 here, like in the case of Spectacular Spider-Man 116, the 9.4 is worth more than the 9.6. And what you have to do is just kind of, in that case, give the 9.6 a gradual bump or reduce the 9.4. But if you're looking at $172 9.8, the 9.6 is probably somewhere around $90, $95, maybe $100. And the 9.4 is probably around $75 to $90. Now, these values were taken at the time that I sent the books off for pressing. So these are the fair market values as of October 26th, 2022. That's when I cataloged these. So these are not pulling in any sort of live values. However, after the unboxing, I will put in the current fair market values of the books at the grade that they received. But again, I was just showing you kind of where my thinking was at. Like if you're looking at like, why Star Wars 34? Because if Star Wars 34 comes back at a 9.8, at the time I submitted it, 9.8 is around $248 for that book. X-Men 211, 9.8, 156, and so on. So that was the justification for me wanting to send these books off for a press and clean, because there was a lot of potential here, and even some decent potential in a 9.4 for a few of these books that I had assessed as a 9.2, where you're talking about, somewhere between $50 and $60 in a 9.4. So my cost of $45 to $53 for each would allow me to at least get my money back if those books were not bumped beyond a 9.4. Obviously, the hope and the goal here is that these books could get to a 9.8. I had looked at all 6 of these books. I thought all of them had pressable defects and really felt like these books would be great for comic book pressing to work on, because I think they had a lot of potential just as what I would consider to be straightforward press and clean candidates. All right, I think it's time. We've looked at the spreadsheet long enough. Let's get to the actual CGC unboxing, where I'll reveal the grade that each of these books received. Here is the CGC shipment that I received that contains the 6 books that I sent to Comic Book Pressing, who pressed and cleaned these books and sent them off to CGC on my behalf. And then the books were routed back to me directly from CGC. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and take a look at the 6 books. And I have not seen these grades, so you will be seeing them for the first time along with me. So let's get this opened up. All right, let's see the grades that these books got. All right, the first book is Machine Man #7. This is from 1978. This book actually got a little popular last year because of the Falcon and Winter Soldier show on Disney Plus, where they were talking about the Power Broker, and this was technically the first appearance or first mention of the Power Broker. So this book caught a little heat at the time, but I don't think anybody's really specking on the Power Broker. But Machine Man is a great series by Jack Kirby. And again, I really thought that this book had a lot of potential for a grade bump. So my assessed grade of this book raw was 8.5. So let's see what it got. 9.2. All right, so a couple of tiers up, which is tremendous. That's great. Let's take a look and see. Yeah, I think, again, similar to my previous video, as I'm angling this book in the light, I can see just creases up and down the spine again. One thing I thought of is I definitely understand that if these comic books that are pressed are not in the cold press long enough, reversion can occur. But I think that that's generally understood if you are into comic book pressing and cleaning. But I think what's interesting is, when does the reversion occur? We don't always know. And what I wonder is, if CGC picks up a freshly pressed comic book and they grade it and slab it, and then while it's encased, the reversion occurs within the actual slab itself, how do we know if the grade assigned to it is based on things that you can see? You can see the creasing here. Or was the book assessed while it was sort of hot off the press, so to speak, and then the reversion occurred afterward? Again, if I'm looking at this book and it's a major key, I would look at it and say, yeah, I would crack this and resubmit it. But from my assessment of an 8.5 to get it up into a 9.2, I would certainly say that this was an improvement and it was a win. It's just, again, I'm seeing things like down in here at the bottom corner, there's just sort of like a rolled corner that I would have expected it to be kind of fixed and corrected and pressed out. I mean, that corner alone, to me, is going to drop it from whatever grade I thought it would get, plus that corner would take it down one more. So it's possible that this could have been a 9.4, but that corner dropped it to a 9.2, but then I'm looking at the creasing again. So it's not that I'm disappointed I got the grade bump. I thought it was an 8.5 and it got a 9.2, so I should be very, very happy and satisfied. But when I look at it, I'm just seeing, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different creases, non-color breaking creases along the spine, where I'm sitting here going, these should be pressed out. So I'm sort of conflicted, where I'm happy I got the bump, but that was the reason I sent this in, was because there were so many creases that if I'm grading the book raw, I am being harsh and I am giving it an 8.5 just because it's all dinged up. But I thought, wow, this would be a great book for a presser to really get a significant bump on. And it did get a bump, yes, but still, the fact that I can see the creases, it just bothers me. Let's move on. All right, here we have Amazing Spider-Man 278. This one I even think I made a value pick not too long ago, because I really felt like there was a lot of value in this book in high grade, but a book that I think could be found fairly easily and was very affordable. So this is from 1986. We got like 40 or 50 issues where the Hobgoblin is popping in and out of Amazing Spider-Man from the late 230s to the late 280s. So issue 278 is right there, where all this mystery around the Hobgoblin character, who is it, and multiple Hobgoblins and everything. So a lot of potential here in this book. And then just the design of the cover, it being all white, again, I thought could be an opportunity for a presser to go ahead and clean this book up for me. Now, my assessment of this book raw was a 9.2, so let's see what this book got. 9.2. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 spine ticks, and then a little bit of color rub or something here. And it could be just something because of the white cover and the white background along the spine, where maybe they were color breaking but really didn't look like it. Honestly, the book looks pretty good. It just, you have to kind of zoom in and really look and know what you're looking for to see the fact that it really is truly a 9.2. I'm kind of angling the back. The back just has a lot of like tiny ticks, and probably just the amount of ticks just added up to that grade loss. I'm not sure if the presser went over the spine with the tack iron. That would be something else that, I would look into or ask about. Like, if you're researching a presser, like, do they do that sort of work, or is this really just kind of a not a quick and dirty press, but a quick press, a light cleaning, maybe with like a sponge, and off it goes. I think that that's something else that I'm thinking about is when you're interviewing a presser, just how far do they take a book, and what is the limitation of their service? Because if it's just a quick press service, a book like this is probably not getting the kind of attention that it needs. But then again, is it worth the extra time and money and effort on a book like this when you may just be better off finding a different raw copy to work on? So this one I thought was a 9.2. It got pressed, it got cleaned, and it got a 9.2. All right, how about Star Wars 34? This is from 1980, and I had picked up about 4 Star Wars books in the 30s for about $5 each from an LCS, and they all looked to be in a very similar condition, like around 9.2, 9.4, but had very pressable defects. And this one I had assessed the book at a 9.2 before pressing and cleaning, and let's see what it got. 9.4. Okay, so it did get the bump, which was nice. Yeah, and very similar to the first book, I'm just seeing non-color breaking creasing along the cover. I'm seeing up here in the corner, there's a crease right above the comics code, and then right here along the staple, and then a pretty significant one right here in the character box, and it's almost just like a ripple. There's no color breaks, there's no color loss that I can see. It's just almost like just a little bit of a ridge of some sort, but it doesn't break color. And there it is. Like, why wouldn't that come out in a press? Unless reversion is occurring. So here we go again. But it got the grade bump. So that's also kind of strange because I should be happy if I thought it was a 9.2 and it got a 9.4. Isn't that what you're looking for? We can't really ask for miracles here, which I understand. But the fact that I'm seeing these issues with the books that I feel a presser should be able to take care of, that's what's bothering me. But I guess if you're just looking at the grades and looking at the grades that I gave these books, then I'm 2 for 3. You could also argue that I undergraded the books and I was more accurate, in which case then maybe these books are getting the same grade or losing a grade. So I know it depends on my original grade, but if we're all talking about the ballpark of a 9.2, 9.4, then they're just not getting improved the way that I think they should. Okay, 3 down, 3 to go. And the next one is Blade Runner #1 from 1982. This is the official Marvel adaptation of Blade Runner. It was a 2-issue series. And as a fan of sci-fi, I love Blade Runner, love the original movie. And this is just one of those adaptation books from the 80s that Marvel did quite a few of these that has value in high grade. The book is fairly easy to find, but I think that if you are a fan of the movie and you're collecting kind of things around it, sometimes comic books tied to different properties will have an additional value, similar to like Star Wars comics and other things, than your standard just superhero books would. So this is one of those cases, and I had assessed this book raw at a 9.4, so let's see what it got after pressing and cleaning. 9.2. Okay, same thing. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I'm seeing all the folds increasing. It lost a grade, so I just kind of want to keep going and wrap this up. Next one we'll go with is X-Men 211. One of my favorite all-time Wolverine covers. I would probably put it in my top 5 affordable Wolverine covers, right? We're not talking about Hulk 181, things like that. X-Men 94, giant size X-Men. I'm not talking about the super mega keys and grails. Just sort of your everyday average affordable book that has Wolverine on it. I love this cover, very classic. You got the 25th anniversary border around it. This book I picked up at a convention, and I gave the book raw a 9.2, so let's see what it got. 9.6, thank goodness. I was getting so discouraged. Okay, 9.6 white pages. I think for me, as I look at it, what is holding it back from getting a 9.8, in my opinion, is that there's dirt on the back. There's just dirt along the spine that, again, if I could crack this thing myself, I would take an eraser, I would perform some gentle dry cleaning along the spine, press it again and send it, and it would get a 9.8. But it got a 9.6. This is a very, very sharp copy. I'm seeing a couple of non-color breaking creases. Again, same story, just either reversion or I don't know, but it's there. I can see it within the slab. So again, I don't know if the reversion occurred before the grading or after, but I can see it in plain sight. These folds and creases and ridges within here, and then plus with the dirt along the spine. But it got the grade bump, so I need to be super happy about it, right? I'll take it. A 9.6 of this book is great. It's just I knew it had the potential, if it was pressed and cleaned properly, to be a 9.8. All right, we got one more left here. Probably the most valuable out of the stack. Spectacular Spider-Man 116 from 1986. I love this saber-tooth cover. First appearance of Foreigner. And I did say it's probably the most valuable, but it was the one I spent the most on as well when I got it from Mile High Comics. I probably overpaid at the time, but I take that risk with Mile High trying to get a book in near mint because I feel like it has, a potential to be pressed and clean and get that grade bump into a 9.6, 9.8 if possible. But I thought that even just raw, this book looked like a 9.4. So let's see what this book got after pressing and cleaning. 9.2. Yay. Yep. Same story. Creasing, light creasing on the cover, just sort of rippling, things that you would just not expect to see after a press. When these get pressed and you get that nice Instagram photograph with the light shining on it, and it looks like super flat and crispy clean, that's not what this book, and it's not what the other 5 books had. I can see it. These just waves across the cover. So those are the 6 books. I'm going to look at these grades. I'm going to show you the values of these 6 books with the grades. I'm going to try and calm down. Hopefully there's still some value left over. But I think you can tell I'm pretty worked up. I'm pretty disappointed. Let's get to the numbers and see if any of these books still have value in these grades. Okay, I've returned. I haven't calmed down. I'm still kind of fired up about this, but I've plugged in the numbers and I have kind of a final assessment that I wanted to share with you here. I've plugged in the CGC grades officially that the book received. You can see them side by side against column CK here, where this was my original estimate or assessed grade of the book raw, and you can see what the grade of the book after it was graded by CGC. You can see the grade that it actually received along with the CGC value here. Now, if you sum up the values here, you see a $260.50 CGC value of the 6 books in total, which technically was an improvement over the value if CGC were to assign my grades to the books, which you'd look at that and say, see, you did improve, you did add value, but not for what it cost me to get the books pressed and clean with that additional piece of shipping also to the presser. You're talking about $80 to send to the presser plus the shipping to send to him with insurance and things like that. So you're adding somewhere between $80 and $100 of additional cost, which does not cover the difference when you're looking at a value of $260 was $214. Now, if you believe me and you trust my original grades and assessment, you will notice that there were some that got a bump. Machine Man 7, 8.5 to a 9.2. Star Wars 34, a 9.2 to a 9.4. X-Men 211, a 9.2 to a 9.6. So 3 of the books got a bump. Spider-Man 278 stayed the same at 9.2. And Spectacular Spider-Man 116 and Blade Runner number 1, they both lost a grade. So when it's all said and done, what did all of this cost me in terms of my final value here, where I've got column CP, and this is, again, what it cost me to essentially acquire all 6 of these books in the slab from the moment that I purchased the book, whether it be online or in person, all the way back from CGC, and to... It's painful for me. It's also embarrassing, but again, I want to show you this process just to really figure out, is all of this really worth it? And in this case, it's not. I essentially threw away $65. And what does that mean exactly? What it means is I could have just searched for Spectacular Spider-Man 116 and a 9.2 and saved myself a lot of hassle and a lot of trouble of trying to find the book on Mile High Comics and researching and tracking and finding a presser and so forth. I could have just gone to any online source or otherwise, maybe it's in a bin of CGC slabs that nobody wants. I don't know where you would find them, but you could find it at that grade at that fair market value price and saved yourself a lot of trouble and ended up saving yourself $65 if you wanted these 6 comic books professionally graded at that price point. So those are the final numbers. That was my final assessment, my final review of comic book _ pressing. So the positives, again, great communication, very, very decent turnaround, very easy to work with, gave me a little bit of a discount. This presser does offer discounts regularly. So there was really nothing wrong in terms of we had great dialogue back and forth in terms of which books I should get pressed. And just, again, overall, great communication from a business transaction perspective. Everything was top notch. It's what you would expect. It is a little bit disconnected for me in terms of it being a formal submission process. I'm very much used to visiting a website, for example, and putting comic books in my cart and putting in my credit card and having an order number and everything, very typical of, an e-commerce type situation. And all of the pressers that I'm dealing with, the pressers that I've completed this process with, and pressers I'm working on currently, where I'm having discussions about sending books to them, it's all through direct messages and chats, and it's all very kind of disconnected from a formal process. So there is some risk there, and this was no different. So you do have to be comfortable with that process, and honestly, I'm not comfortable with that process. So it's something I have to think about is, do I want to continue reaching out to third parties when that is the process of working basically through like a chat messenger type service? I'm trying to stay positive. I'm trying to think about what were the positives here other than lessons learned. The most frustrating part to me is that I don't need a magnifying glass. I don't need some special tool or UV lighting, a black light or anything like that to find these really specific and tiny defects on the books. I can literally just hold the slab up and look at it and spot and say, there's a crease, there's a fold. And if comic book pressing is not supposed to get those things out, then what are we doing? That's really where I would want to sit down with somebody, another presser, and have them look at this and say, no, you cannot expect a fold or a crease or a ding. And I'm not talking about color breaks. I'm just talking about something normal that you would think a quick press could get out. I would need somebody to tell me that my expectations are way too high, because right now I'm at the point where I want to start pressing and cleaning myself, not pressing my comic books, because I feel like if I know which defects to look for and I know kind of the method that it would take to get them out, whether it be light erasing on a back cover, a little bit of moisture along a corner or spine, a tack iron work, or whatever it might be, I feel like I can do this. I can do this myself. So again, from a transaction perspective, comic book _ pressing, a pleasure to work with, but extremely disappointed with the outcome, not the actual grades, but what I can see on the books themselves for what I would consider to be very, very pressable defects. Let me know what you think. Did I overreact on this order? Are my expectations too high? Am I going about this in the wrong way? How do you approach this? Do you stay away from pressing or grading altogether? I would love to get your feedback. So if you don't mind dropping a comment, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.